Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. I took statistics in a room that looked a lot like this one. I don't know if it was this exact room, but I'm really glad to be back. I'm going to give a brief presentation called The Future of Urban Mobility, and then I'll take your questions. So there are over 1 billion cars in the world today. If you consider that for a moment, the emissions, cities like Philadelphia and New York, a lot of cities are very carbon efficient in terms of transportation because people take the subway. In cities like Los Angeles, 80% of emissions come from transportation and only 20% from buildings. In cities like New York, that's flipped. 20% of emissions come from transportation, 80% come from buildings, things like boilers and whatnot. But there's an enormous amount of emissions that come from cars that for the bulk of the time are idle. If any of you own a car, I won't make you raise your hand, but just think, is anyone using it right now? Odds are no, because these are really expensive hulks of steel that you have to purchase or finance, and then you have to insure and maintain. You have to garage it if you don't live in a place with a parking spot. There's a lot of costs, and once people incur those costs, they tend to use them. Even in a city like New York City has a very dense transportation network, probably one of the most dense when you talk about subway and bus. Other modes, there's a really dynamic bike share system in New York City, but even then, the subway system does not take you to, it doesn't go to everyone's front door, nor does the bus network. And there are millions of cars that enter New York City and millions of New Yorkers that own cars because they live in neighborhoods that don't have access to mass transit. So let's talk about Uber for a second. So when the people that started Uber 7 years ago, they didn't think about any of this stuff. They just thought it was cool that you could push a button to get a ride. And they developed a transportation platform that matches riders and drivers. Our business is that if you have a car and you want to earn extra income, we will connect you to someone with money that needs a ride. That's it. You know, fundamentally, it's very simple. There's a lot of other things about it that are more complicated than that, but at its core, that's our business. We also operate a business that connects restaurants that want to sell food with people that want to eat it and a courier. And we're the platform between those people. We also have a business that connects shippers and carriers. If you have excess capacity in your tractor trailer and you need to ship something somewhere, we will connect you. Those are our core businesses, and our special sauce is to do that more efficiently than other people and use technology to deliver a better experience at a better price with more information and data, et cetera. So, back to Uber. This slide, if you look on the lower right-hand side, there is the date by year. These hexagons represent the wait time. The light green is a wait time of under 5 minutes, and the dark green is a wait time of under 10 minutes. So when you see I'll let it cycle to the next, through the next series of years. And in 2013, it's really downtown Los Angeles, the core. This is the kind of pattern in all Uber cities. But then if you look in 2014, spread down the valley, and then look, now Los Angeles is very, it's not dense, you know, it's very spread out. Look at that, 2015, and then look how much of the city has access to transportation in under 10 minutes. It's like a new layer of mobility across the entire city. Same deal in Paris. The year on the bottom right, wait time. We could go through 100 cities. It's all kind of the same thing. The trip pattern starts out in the urban core, central business district, and then expands out. And this is really bringing transportation to underserved neighborhoods, places that don't have access to mass transit. In New York City, if you look at our trip growth, it is the fastest by leaps and bounds in the boroughs outside Manhattan that don't have access to mass transit. If DC, it's Ward 10. And if it's Boston, it's Roxbury and Mattapan, where we see, really intense use of Uber and our ride-sharing service, Uber Pool, which I'll get into. Okay, another benefit. People use Uber at times when they go out. And there's a correlation between drunk driving arrests, drunk driving fatalities, and crashes, and when a market has Uber. There's a study done at a temple that first looked at this, and we can't say it's causation, but it definitely correlates. And if you look, each line represents a different city: Amsterdam, London, Paris, Stockholm, and Warsaw. Our rush hour is actually the weekends at night. You see at midnight the trips spike, and when the time in which bars close, trips spike. We had someone whose job it was to try and call and figure out at what time bars close in dozens of cities, which actually is a harder fact to obtain than you might imagine. And we actually stopped looking because when you pull the trip data, the trips spike. You know, there's a very high correlation that when the bars close, Uber use goes up, and that's getting people home, not getting behind the wheel. Okay, this is another look at New York City. This time the year is in the upper right-hand corner. So if you look at, you see Manhattan, you see gentrified areas of Greenpoint, Williamsburg, downtown Brooklyn. But now look at upper Manhattan. Look at South Brooklyn. Look at, see the airports? That's JFK, that's LaGuardia. They light up right early. But this is a layer of mobility that goes around the entire city. If you look at a different part of New York City than you did the first time, now we're lit up all across Manhattan and gentrified parts of Brooklyn. But wow, look at Queens and Astoria, and then deeper into like Flushing, and then this is like Brownsville, East New York, and even in the Bronx. So next we're going to look, same thing as Paris. Oh, I'm sorry, this is London. Okay, this is a great story. So London had a change in service called, they opened up certain stops in the night tube. So they ran the tube at night, and they ran certain stops. And when they started that service, there was a great chance for us to study what would happen to patterns of Uber use. So nearly 30% of Uber rides in London are within 200 meters of a tube stop. So this is like the central business district blacked out in the middle, and all these lines represent trips that start or end at a tube stop, and the white dots are tube stops. So then, now we look, this is isolating only those stops that are night tube stops. And you can see the reddish color is decreased pickups, and the bluish color is increased pickups. You see fewer pickups in the central business district, more pickups at the night tube stops than we saw beforehand, which is telling us that people are taking the night tube, and then they're using Uber to get home. They call that the first mile, last mile problem. Like no one's going to take SEPTA because how are you going to get to the SEPTA station? Or the commuter rail parking lot is overflowing with cars. And we have a partnership with SEPTA where there are certain stations that don't have as high ridership that we're targeting, where we do advertising and say, hey, take Uber to the SEPTA. And then we've done app integrations with mass transit systems like MARTA in Atlanta and some other places to say, hey, how can we really drive adoption to complement mass transit? So I'll give you two examples of those partnerships that I think are really, really cool. Number one is in Summit, New Jersey. Is anyone here from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania area? So in a lot of these states, there are these bedroom communities that have commuter rail lines that take people in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, into New York City. In Boston, it's the T. And in a lot of these towns, the highways are choked with traffic, and people want to take the train, and the commuter rail parking lots are overflowing. And people got to walk a long way to get to the train, or in the case of Summit, they were faced with building a new parking garage, which is going to cost tens of millions of dollars. You got to float a bond, you get to borrow the money, and then you're going to be repaying that over years and years and years from the revenue you make from the new garage, which you now have to operate and maintain. And that's not what the town wanted to do. So they issued an RFP that Uber responded to and won. where if it costs $4 a day to park in the Summit parking lot. If you have a trip that begins in Summit and ends at the train station, you pay $2 and the city will pay the difference. So you Uber to the train station and the city will actually subsidize it. And then to and there, that's at the equivalent cost of parking in the lot. So you're paying the same amount. And we're just starting the second year. This is a pilot. We did it for 1 year where the city elected to renew the pilot, which was encouraging, and now it's in its second year. So you're building like a virtual parking garage. So the city doesn't need to undergo that capital expense. So that's kind of a partnership with the city. We've also done other partnerships where safe rides to subsidize drunk driving programs. We've done in places in Florida actually on off hours. Bus is great mass transit, but if you run a bus at night and there's one person in it, that's actually not efficient. So there's all different kinds of use cases that we're only now starting to explore. Another one, paratransit. This is a huge one. Transit agencies have an obligation under Americans with Disabilities Act to provide equivalent service. So there are a lot of mass transit that's not accessible to people with disabilities. They run paratransit. And these systems a lot of them are really inefficient. They're really bad for the taxpayers because they're really expensive on a per trip basis. They're really bad for the riders because you have to call a day in advance and it's like a 2-hour window. It's like the cable guy coming to your house, and no one likes them. It's really good for no one except maybe the operators of the program who earn these high fees. So now in Boston, we are doing paratransit trips with the MBTA program, which is called the RIDE. So non-emergency medical transportation is a hugely inefficient area, and that's something that is a real benefit. So this really only works if it's reliable and efficient. So if you go back to those maps, why does Uber work? If you need to go to the airport at 4 in the morning and you open your Uber app and you get that feeling like, oh, what if it's not going to be there? You need that reliability, and then you need affordability. So that's why I was showing those maps with the green hexagons, because that shows where we have reliable service across all of Los Angeles, all of New York City, all of Paris, and the 400 cities around the world where we operate. And then going to affordability, we noticed several years ago that a lot of our trips that are concurrent have similar beginning and end points. So what our engineers did is say, hey, what if we could combine those trips instead of 2 cars into one? And that's Uber Pool. Uber Pool started first in San Francisco, and in that first city, half of all Uber trips are Uber Pool trips in San Francisco. It's culturally, changing consumer behavior is really hard. People have been talking about carpooling since the oil shocks of the 70s, and it never really happened. But there are tens of millions of matched Uber Pool trips. So this is San Francisco, and this is a simulation of volume if every Uber trip was an UberX trip versus a pool trip, and you put more people in fewer cars. So that's another one of our goals. The capacity of a roadway network is fixed. The pipe is fixed. You can't, in a clogged road, you can't put any more cars down the pipe, but you can put more people in the cars. And if you do it in a way that consumers are happy with, you can make your roadway network more efficient. And in a lot of cities, if you look at city design, you actually are restricting capacity because you want to create express bus or bus rapid transit lanes or bike lanes or traffic calming measures and all these things. So if you look at Uber Pool at scale, which it's been up in dozens of cities around the U.S., the potential is there to save a ton of vehicle miles traveled, reduce carbon emissions, and save a lot of fuel. So there are, if this service is affordable and reliable, what we've seen, and this has already happened, this is not a new thing, this exists, people won't buy a car. If you talk to people, if you guys travel at all, a lot of people, when they go on a trip, they don't rent a car anymore. They take Uber, it's cheaper. It's easier, you don't have to go to the off lot airport parking lot. You know, I certainly haven't rented a car in a long time because you can just take Uber. And then people your age or younger are buying cars at a reduced rate. And this is something that automobile companies have caught on to and are really concerned about, because in their business, if the rate at which people buy cars decreases even a small amount, that's really meaningful for them. So basically, we don't think of ourselves as competing with mass transit or Lyft or Chariot or bike share networks. We compete with personal ownership of the vehicle. And studies show, there's a study by APTA, the American Public Transit Association, that the more people use ride-sharing services like Uber and Lyft or others, the more they use other modes, like bike share or walking or bus or rail or what have you. And this isn't slowing down. If you look at the percentage of people who, you know, I'm very immersed in this, so this always, sometimes I have to step out, that ride sharing is only 4% of miles traveled. A lot of people haven't ever heard of Uber, which is hard to believe, but that's what our data says, and I've borne that out by people I've talked to. So that number of miles driven through ride sharing is only going to rise. And when people like you guys, you enter the workforce, or you have a family or whatever, you're going to have, you know, my kids have never had cable TV. You know, we've been a cord cutter for however many years they've been alive. So similarly, I don't know if they're going to have driver's licenses, because it brings me to our next topic, which is self-driving. So self-driving technology is going to really fast forward. Oops, sorry. Oh, okay, that's not on. So this is a video that I won't show, but basically we are testing self-driving cars in Pittsburgh and Arizona and San Francisco that will have, could have a really positive impact on cities, and it could not. If everyone has their own self-driving car and parks in their driveway at night, and it drives them to work and parks at work, you really aren't getting the benefits of reducing congestion. You know, there's like that safety impact, but we think there's really three legs of the future of autonomous to have that, the best policy outcome you could possibly have, and that is the autonomous, electric, and shared. So if people are using shared services like Uber that are self-driving, that are electric, the policy benefit on emissions and VMT and congestion, by VMT I mean vehicle miles traveled, how much people are driving, could be substantial. So it's very early days. I don't think anyone is clear how the technology is going to develop and in what way there will be the first commercial applications, whether it's going to be, you know, shuttle routes with no left turns or trucks doing freight. There's a huge shortage of truck drivers in this country right now, which is a real concern for shippers. I can't tell you what that's going to be, but I could tell you, like, some of my work is with policymakers and legislators and trying to regulate self-driving technology, and our message for them, to them, is that the technology is nascent. We need to let it develop. We need a structure that allows for a couple things: safety, consumer protections, crash reporting, titling, insurance. All those things have to be in place, but not something that could hurt the development of the technology. So that there's a study, shared self-driving cars could reduce the number of cars on the road by 90%. And if you think about it, if everyone doesn't need that car in their driveway or garage and then at their place of business, think about all the space that we dedicate to parking and all the other uses we could have for it. All those parking garages and parking lots, you can turn them into parks. Or, you know, all those commuter rail parking lots, that could be housing. What a great place to add density than a train station parking lot, because it's transit-oriented design. there's a lot of people who are thinking about, the railroads. What a great revenue source for the railroads as well. If you guys are familiar with MTR, that's the mass transit system in Hong Kong. They own and operate all the real estate around their stations, and that's a revenue source for them, how they can keep upgrading their infrastructure and be really well capitalized. So the potential is fantastic. That's our ultimate hope for the future, that journeys can be shared, and you can use a combination of ride sharing and mass transit, and people will take these services not through coercion but through choice. The best way to increase consumer adoption of something is to make it desirable or make it cheaper, make it in their economic interest to do so. I said this before, I'll say it again, it's very hard to change consumer behavior. Google Glass exists, Snapchat spectacles exist, the tech is there, but people don't walk around with cameras on their faces because maybe it looks funny, or we're not ready for that yet. And maybe at some point we will, and you'll see more wearables, but right now it's not through eyeglasses. It's through something on your wrist or whatnot. And the reason for that is nothing to do with the tech. It has nothing to do with the regs. It's all about the consumer adoption. And that's something, important to keep in mind.